Sir, please confirm me. Am I audible?
Yes, ma'am, you are audible.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. Thank you. So happy morning, everyone. I, Neha Sharma, as very well introduced by Sudhir, sir. Thank you so much. Assistant Professor in the Department of Management Studies, also the convener of 1 week National Faculty Development Program. It gives me immense pleasure to extend my warm welcome to all the esteemed dignitaries and participants. The Institute takes immense pride and honor to welcome our honorable chief guest for the day. So let me take the honor to welcome our first eminent chief guest of the day, Honorable Professor Dr. Vikas Singh, Vice Chancellor, ITM University, Raipur, who is kind enough to accept our invitation to grace the FDP by his esteemed presence. Sir is an accomplished higher education leader with over 27 years of experience in establishment and growth of multidisciplinary universities. Dr. Singh has authored the book on new education policy titled Paper to Screen, The Future of Education. This book has featured in Amazon best-selling education book list and has been translated into Persian language by University of Mazandaran, Iran. Dr. Singh has received Lifetime Achievement Award for Education Excellence and bestowed with Iconic Leader in Higher Education Award. Business World has recognized him with Top Education Brand Award for Excellence and Innovation in Engineering Education. And India Today has recognized him as Best Academician Director. Dr. Singh is the president of the Institution's Innovation Council, which is supported by MHRD Innovation Cell. Under the leadership of Dr. Singh, ITS Engineering College in Atal ranking of institutions on innovations achievement 2020 was characterized as a brand A institution and was ranked among top 25 institutions across India. Also, I would like to highlight that Dr. Singh has the distinction of being the only Asian member in the Global Leadership Coaching Group of BusyNet Global Business Education Network, UK. We once again welcome you, sir, and it's so kind enough to accept our invitation. Thank you so much, sir, and over to you for the opening remarks of the FDP.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Neha, so much for such elaborate introduction. And one important thing that you missed in the introduction was that, I happen to be your teacher, and it's such a proud moment that my worthy student, Neha, has invited me today for this, interaction with the faculty members. I thank, IITM, and I thank the director, Sudhir Kumar Sharma ji, for inviting me. It's really a privilege, a pleasure to be interacting with faculty members, because I'm myself a very passionate teacher, and it's always a pleasure to be interacting with faculty members, to be among the faculty group, because a teacher would always remain a teacher, and it's really an honor to be interacting with all of you. This faculty development program, 1 week long program, shows, number one, because you have on your own registered for this faculty development program, which shows that you have that fire in you. You want to develop yourself, you want to become better teachers, better faculty members, which I believe is the first requirement for transformation. Nobody can transform you from outside. If you want to actually transform yourself, the fire has to be in your belly. You yourself should be passionate and looking forward to transform yourself. So that's the first battle won. If you are on a Monday morning attending this program, sitting at your places, in your offices, in your faculty cabins, faculty chambers, all across the country, which shows that you want to develop yourself, you want to transform yourself. The biggest challenge, which I have seen over my 27 years of teaching career, is that you come across very few faculty members who are faculty by choice. I think this is one of the big challenge of higher education in India, that we find, because over the course of years, I've interviewed lots of faculty members for different positions. The first challenge which I find is that faculty members are in this profession not by choice, but rather by chance. And when I say rather by chance, they would have thought about joining some corporate world, join some company somewhere, but because they didn't get that good an opportunity, so they decided to come into higher education. Now, why I'm saying this? Because if I look at my case, after completion of my engineering, I got my first placement in a Goenka Group company. Company was a very famous process industry which manufactures PVC flooring using a calendaring plant, 24 hours process industry company, which was manufacturing products by the name Wonderfloor. Very famous Wonderfloor flooring, railways and all big, institutions, government institutions are their clients. I got my first switch. I joined to another company in calendaring, which was by Birla Group. So my first industry experience was in Goenka, then in Birla, and then I switched to academics. So why I'm sharing this? I'm sharing this because I personally believe that I am a teacher by choice. I was working in industry and then I decided to switch to academics. Now, because why this happened, it's again a story, because my younger brother was, doing his management graduation. He was facing difficulty in one subject, operations research. I was topper of my university in that subject. So I said, okay, look, I'll help you out in this subject. So he and his 3-4 classmates, were there. They started coming to me in the evening to take some, I would say teaching notes from me. They liked my way of, explaining things. And then they urged me that, brother, why don't you come and, join academics? Why not switch from industry to academics? Because at that point of time, academics was opening up. So being passionate teacher and being a teacher by choice, these two things are very essential to transform yourself. You should be a teacher by choice. Now, I often say this in my discussion that in 1991, when India opened up the economy, then the Lakshmi was liberated. Lakshmi was having clutches all around. We were not having any global presence. Global companies were not accepted in India. Consumerism was not there. Indian people were not having exposure to the best of the things. And then in 1991 happened, Lakshmi got liberated. I say similarly, last year with this new national education policy, now Saraswati Mata is also liberated. All those clutches which were there on higher education teaching, all those clutches have gone now, and in coming next 10, 15, 20 years, Indian higher education system will be better than most of the countries worldwide, if not the best in the world. The direction is clearly mentioned there. Now, why I'm saying this? If you want to remain relevant, if you want to remain focused, if you want to remain a teacher which is liked by the students, you need to transform yourself. That's the first thing. And I'm so very happy that IITM decided to have this interesting FDP on this interesting topic of transforming faculty members. These new generation students, these Generation Z students have very different exposure. They have very different aspirations. They have very different goals. So the teaching learning process of last generation, the teaching learning process of the 10 years back, 15 years back teaching learning process will not be liked by these new students. So if a teacher might be, old in age with long number of years of experience, if they are using the earlier teaching learning practices, if they are using the earlier teaching learning methodology in the classrooms, they will not be liked by these students, because these students have been exposed to things to which even our teachers are not exposed to. And that is why, when Modi Sahab, Honorable Prime Minister, mentioned about the vision of next 25 years, India 2.0, we just celebrated Amrit Mahotsav for next 75 weeks, and then for next 25 years, we are going to celebrate this and transform India into India 2.0. These young kids, your students in class today, the students that you are teaching today, they are going to transform India to India 2.0. So they have very large aspirations. They have very large, fertile playground. They have tremendous exposure. So in these kind of students, for these kind of students, it is very essential that teacher needs to transform themselves. Burn your passion, ignite your passion. If you are a passionate teacher in class, only then you can make your class, or ignite the passion of your students. So try to learn these new tools which are available. When I'm saying this, a student gets selected for 4 things. When a student gets employed, there are 4 things basically. Their skill, their behavior, and their attitude. Now, IITM is a accredited college, and neck by neck, and that too in category A, which shows that IITM is following outcome-based teaching learning process, which is a matter of proud, because only 15% institutions in India, there are 50,000 colleges, there are 1,000 universities, only 15% of colleges and universities have actually gone for accreditation. So I'm speaking with faculty members of a A-grade institution, which shows that IITM has strong teaching learning process in place. But still, there are, if we look at 12 program outcomes from PO1 to PO12, only first 5 program outcomes in engineering program especially are domain dependent. And when I'm saying domain dependent, means a faculty member can cover the PO1 to PO5 using the lecturing method. But the PO6 to PO12, they cannot be covered by lecturing method. And that is why, it is very essential for a teacher to learn not to lecture in class. Those days are gone. Those students were different, those who were happy by the lecturing method. To transform yourself, first thing is you need to do away with the lecturing. Lecturing is not liked by students, and that is why there is a challenge. Teacher says students are not coming to class. We have made attendance compulsory 75%. Still students are not coming. There are lots of challenges. The reason is you are lecturing them in class. Students are not ready to come and get lectured. All these lectures are available. They have been exposed to EDX. They have been exposed to Coursera. They have been exposed to Udemy. All those online platforms. They have been exposed to some of the best teachers of the world. They have that kind of exposure. So to those students having that kind of exposure, you need to, of course, transform yourself. Your lecturing, the tools that you are using in your classroom, the teaching learning process, all that is to be transformed by you. And this is not the responsibility of your director. This is not the responsibility of your college. This is not the responsibility of your affiliating university. This is the responsibility of teacher to ensure, because I am the king in my class. So if I'm a passionate teacher, I will bring those tools in my class which are present day tools. We have been talking about flipped classroom. We have been talking about gamification in classroom. We have been talking about blended learning in classroom, use of video content. We have been talking about case study methodology in classroom. We have heard all these terms. But how many of us have actually learned in depth of these tools? I still find teachers, when you talk about case method, they will pick a case from any textbook. They will pick a case from Harvard, download it, pay $3, $4, $5, download it and use in the class. I personally, if you are taking a 20-page case in your class, your teaching notes must be of 40 pages. You must have worked on that case in depth. All the possible situations which can happen in the classroom, whatever ideas can float from the side of students, you must have thought about all the directions of discussion going on. Whichever direction the class discussion goes on, you must be ready with your points for that direction itself. Because in a case discussion, students can take direction, discussion can take any direction. And every year, when you take that case in class, you must add at least 2 new pages to your teaching notes. So taking case for the namesake is one thing, but taking case as a passionate teacher in your class is a different thing. So teaching notes are more important than, I would say, taking the case in class. Likewise, flipped classroom, we are talking about flipped classroom. Now, if I'm not taking lecture in class, then how I'm going to use those remaining minutes of the class? Engaging students, creating activities in class which are engaging student is very essential. They should be involved in class. They should look forward to come to your class. We are talking about outcome-based education. This is my lecture outcome. This is my course outcome. This is my program outcome. All these outcomes need to be learner-centric. That what a learner would be able to learn. But what is the responsibility of teacher? How to ensure that the learner learns those things. So teaching objectives of the class, which are teacher-centric, that to ensure this is what is to be learned by the students, what activities I will do in my class, what tools I'm going to use in my class, they are equally important. So when you create the learning objective of your lectures, there must be clear focus that this particular topic of my subject of my course, what kind of cognitive level I'm going to achieve in this, what kind of tools I'm going to use in my class, what activities I'm going to do in my class, what teaching learning process I'm going to apply in my class, so that the learning outcome of my lecture are achieved by the my class students. What kind of live projects I'm going to use, what kind of peer activities I'm going to plan. There are lots of domains, lifelong learning, there is a domain on teamwork, there is a domain on ethics. These domains are also, these domain independent outcomes should also be touched. Communication skills in your classroom, a faculty can achieve that. All these activities should be planned in advance. So when I'm taking a course, I should be very ready that what all I'm going to do in each of my 35 or 40 lectures, depending on it's a 2 credit course or 3 credit course. Whatever I'm going to do in each of my lectures should be decided by me in advance. So the most important part is that teacher has to be a very passionate teacher. This new education policy is going to open up the field. When I'm saying Mata Saraswati is freed from clutches, I mean it very sincerely by my heart. There are 50,000 institutions, and It is very clearly mentioned in the new national education policy that institutions should be of multiple disciplines. I'm very sure that in coming 5 years, coming 7 years, at least 10,000 of these institutions will be converting into state private universities. So if I can expect that 10,000 new universities are going to come in next 5 years, 7 years, they are going to require 10,000 vice chancellors. They are going to require 20,000 pro vice chancellors. They are going to require 50,000, 60,000 deans and department heads. If, as a faculty member, you are not prepared, you are not ready to transform yourself, then you will lose this opportunity. But if you are attending such FDPs, if you are working on yourself, if you are developing yourself, then I am very confident that every faculty member who is attending this FDP today will be at least at a level of department dean or pro vice chancellor or vice chancellor in the next 5 to 7 years. So this is my opening comment. Thank you so much for inviting me. All the very best to each one of you. May God bless all the faculty members and the institution for growth in their career and for achieving the goal of affecting positively the lives of our students. Thank you so much, Neha, for inviting me. It's a big pleasure to be attending this and to be speaking at this faculty development program. Thank you so very much.
Thank you, thank you. Thanks a lot, sir, for your experience and wisdom of knowledge you shared with us. It will surely help us excelling in life. The way you deliberated on how transformation is so important these days for teachers today. Not only because of digitization, but yes, we are into the noble profession. So, how important it is, and it can only happen. Transformation, very truly said, can only happen when a teacher wants from within. So thank you so much, sir, for enlightening us on this with your insightful opening remark. I once again express my sincere gratitude to Dr. Singh for such an insightful inaugural to the session. Thanks a lot, sir. Thank you so much. Now I would request Dr. Vikas Bharara, Associate Professor, IITM, convener of the FDP, to introduce our next chief guest of the day. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Neha. Neha, first, please let me confirm, am I audible?
Yes, yes, sir, you're audible.
Okay. Good morning, one and all. On behalf of IITM, I, Dr. Vikas Brara, would take the honor to welcome our honorable chief guest, Professor Dr. A.K. Saini. Sir is currently Dean at University School of Management Studies, GGS IP University, New Delhi. Sir is the member secretary of Indraprastha Internal Quality Assurance Cell, that is IIQAC of the university. Professor Saini is a postgraduate in physics, computers, and management. Sir obtained his doctorate degree from FMS Delhi University in the area of information systems. Before joining USMS, he was holding a senior academic position at FMS. He carries with him blend of industrial and academic experience of more than 35 years, out of which 6 years in the industry in various responsible capacities. Dr. Saini has to his credit 16 published edited books and over 110 plus papers in national and international journals as well as conferences. Sir has traveled extensively abroad and has visited Europe under teacher exchange program for the teaching courses abroad. Sir has guided more than 18 PhD theses and currently he is a member of Studies Advisory Editorial Board of several universities and institutions as well as of reputed journals. Sir is a trained NAC assessor and his major interests include information systems, database, technology and innovation management, knowledge management and healthcare systems. Sir is fellow and senior member of several professional societies such as CSI, that is Computer Society of India, IETE, Institution of Electronics and Telecommunication Engineers, IMA, All India Management Association, and ORSI, etc. Sir has served as Secretary and Chairman IIT Delhi Center, Honorary Treasurer of IIT during 2010-12, Chairman Board of Examination, Zonal Coordinator, Chairman Publications Committee, and is currently the Vice President of IIT. Sir is also serving as an independent director in Section 8 of the IEC. Sir, once again, we welcome you and we are very proud to announce that you are our chief guest of the session. Request you, sir, for your opening marks for the session. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Vikas. Please tell me, am I audible?
Yes, sir, you are audible.
Thank you so much. So, a very good morning to one and all. It's really my privilege to share the panel with our respectable and esteemed Professor Vikas Singh, the Honorable Vice Chancellor of ITM University, Raipur. I would also like to welcome all the esteemed guests, the keynote speakers, the authors, the faculty members, researchers, and participants from different parts of the country for this inaugural function of the 1 week online faculty development program on the theme Transforming Teachers for a Sustainable Post-COVID-19 World, organized by IITM. In fact, at the very outset, let me compliment and congratulate IITM for taking this initiative of organizing this FDP, because I think we all know that this time is called COVID-19. In fact, I was just looking at the term post-COVID. That means IITM is assuming that the COVID is over. So my point, which I would like to discuss, is that we all actually have been affected by COVID-19 pandemic as such. And if you see in the last 1.5 years, we do not have any, let's say, we have faced so many issues. And some of the characteristics, you see that this pandemic has done what to us? If we see in short, it is basically the first occurrence in the entire known human history. Very surprising and interesting thing is that neither we know coronavirus fully till date, although 1.5 years, nor there's so much of effective vaccine, you can say, because we still be talking of 70%, 80% effectiveness and all that. And we look at the thumb rule, which actually, because to protect us against this virus, we're trying to adopt a very simple rule: social distancing, using masks, isolation, hand washing, ventilators, lockdown. All these actually are the responses which we have seen being made use of by the human beings as such to respond to this virus. Of course, we say lockdown, they bring the wheel of human life to a complete halt. And all its spokes like education, transportation, industry, non-organized workforces, businessmen, small and MSMEs, small business, and even MSMEs also, agriculture, you see everything has been affected. Tourism, entertainment. Another thing which you find is this basically is a worldwide phenomenon. It's not basically confined to the developed countries or the developing countries. It's basically affected almost everybody on the globe. Another very interesting feature to note is that although we look at the human beings being affected by that, but there are other living creatures or species which have always remained unaffected. If you see the animals and birds and all that, there's no impact on them. And if you see overall the losses that have accrued because of this pandemic, they are totally unaccountable. We'll have to wait for a couple of years to really understand the kind of impact and the losses it has made on us. In fact, we have been talking of a term called new normal. Why this term was floated? In fact, this was floated by Peter Cutler, and he mentioned about it that that we're talking of new normal, but if you look at the normal, that means there's something wrong with the normal, and we all agree and accept that the new normal, which actually is something good for us. So the normal was not able to achieve that. New normal is trying to really help us in many ways, whether it is the environmental pollution and all that. So I think look at all those aspects. But if you see, although the entire world is facing this COVID pandemic, there's only one response. If you see in different domains, which has really kept some hopes open for us, and that was technology. So we have seen that technology has actually been a great disruptor of the entire functioning of the economy itself. It has been able to really help us to revive the economic downturn. And we have also seen the technology and governance have come together as a force for bringing the social change and harnessing that data which is generated through different initiatives and try to help us. And the only thing which this pandemic has done is it has preponed that digital transformation which we were expecting about 5 years down the line. It has been preponed by this COVID pandemic or COVID-19 pandemic. Now, despite all this thing, the education activities, in fact, the only domain which we find very interesting and very challenging from this perspective of disruptions has been the educational domain. And we all have been facing this issue because we come from different institutions which are in the domain of educational education itself, that the educational activities did not stop. And here, that's what I said, the role of technology comes in a big way. We have seen that the adoption of technology has been very, very fast, whether it is the small child studying in the nursery classes or the first class when we see in initial days of the schooling, or it is the advanced students in the higher education domain, or it is the researchers. They all have responded. Even the parents, the people have been working on this. They've been working on adopting this and learning this technology. And we've seen that the digital devices were shot at home when we want to really make use of all these devices. So this is basically what we've seen, that educational domain has been one of the very fastest domain to adopt it. And we all resorted to what's called online teaching learning processes. Again, when we talk of teaching learning processes being the normal thing in the last 1.5 years, but there are different myths and truths about both this online teaching learning processes. And if you look at, in short, just in fact, that is basically the theme of the FDP, that post COVID-19, that we were trying to look at how the teaching learning process is going to be affected and what is the role of teachers in that. So we all agree that it's quite boring and there's no life in the online sessions, which we have all seen as teachers also, as students also. We've seen that it's quite boring and there's no life, what you find in the traditional mode of teaching. Students are quite irregular in the online sessions also, that we've seen, that we all know. And practical courses, of course, there's a difficulty in teaching the practical courses, the labs and all that. It is definitely a challenge. And if I see that that Guru Shishya kind of a bonding which actually used to exist in a normal classroom, that is totally absent. Teachers actually are just delivering talks, or they're lecturing, or they're sharing and discussing different concepts against the black wall. Absence of that guru's aura, that's another dimension. Even when you're in a normal class, the physical class, you find that the teacher, by looking at the faces of the students, they can assess whether he is following or not, or he's sleeping, or what he's doing. That means they can, that kind of bonding and the kind of aura with the teacher has in the class, that also is also absent. And sometimes we feel that there's a total feeling of alienation as such. No networking among the students, no understanding of the diversity of the class itself, which we find. And if you see, it's difficult to keep the students offline, online in that mode. Yes, we all agree that these are some of the challenges and the problem which we faced. But at the same time, we also note that there are certain advantages also which have been offered by online teaching learning processes. The biggest has been the time flexibility. That it has given a lot of freedom to the students and the teachers, that no traveling is required. Sitting at home, you are able to deliver, and you can schedule the class as per your convenience at any point of time. And if you see, if you cannot attend a class live, you can always miss the lecture. But no, in the teaching learning process, which is online happening, the classes are recorded and the student can always go back and try to cover the topic later on. That means the loss which was there in the physical class is now almost eliminated. But it has basically what's called the 18 to 19 hours per day can be converted to productive time for the class also. Interested students can get some more time to interact with the teachers also, because there's no limitation of the class timings also. They can interact and connect with the teachers also. And absence of a teacher for any reason does not make any permanent loss of class, because the class is generally taken later. That means you can always schedule the classes as per convenience. And because of the advantages, what I even look at the current program which we are attending together. Nobody would have imagined that this kind of an online program can happen, or an online conference can happen. That people connecting from different parts of the country or from the globe and each actually is able to take advantage of it. We see that Professor Vikas Singh joining from Raipur, from Delhi, some other people from different parts of the country, they're joined in. I think that's the beauty of this online classes. Now, if you look at the whole crux of this discussion, is that we need to accept that the online teaching and the physical teaching has to coexist permanently in the future. And that is why we're talking of a scenario which even NEP, which Professor Vikas Singh also mentioned, that we're talking of a blended mode of teaching. Even UGC has also given us that kind of a freedom in our curriculum that we can incorporate about 40% of the content which can be taught online. If you look at from the industry perspective also, the McKinsey Global Institute, they have highlighted that the rapid spread of digital technologies and their potential value to the Indian economy by 2025, if the government and the private sector work together. That means that study has also established that the government and the private sector have to work together to create the new digital ecosystem. And education is a part of that ecosystem itself. Of course, we know that there are two primary factors which have shifted due to the pandemic. One is, of course, I'm talking about the education domain. First is the pedagogical adaptations. And this have proven to be the pivotal, as the traditional lecturing in-person models do not translate to a remote learning environment. We may use the different channels, whether it's the radio, TV, mobile. Teachers need to adapt their practices. And this we have seen that they said that teachers actually have rose to the occasion. They have adopted these practices. Initially, nobody would have heard of the things called Zoom, but I think it became so popular across the teaching community and the students that everybody was trying to hook onto the Zoom. So, I mean, what I'm trying to say, the pedagogical adaptations were they are very important, and we need to continue. In fact, as I said, that this is going to continue for a long time. So, second point which I want to mention is that pandemic has really recalibrated how teachers divide their time between teaching, engaging students, and administrative tasks. Because we have seen that even during the evenings also we have been holding meetings, classes, and all that. That's what actually was the real scenario. In fact, if you look at a smaller country like Brazil, and they conducted a survey, and they found that 83% of the teachers did not consider being prepared to teach remotely, and 67% were anxious, and 38% felt tired, and less than 10% were actually happy or satisfied. I think this is almost true when you talk of the country like India, where we find that there's that the teachers have really felt in terms of the experiences with the online teaching because of different reasons, whether it is the comfort level with the technology and all that. So all these actually, so this too, that means we have to really adapt and make sure that we are able to adjust and devote our time properly so that we are more prepared for this kind of online teaching itself. Now, if you see, I think again focusing primarily on this the role of the teachers as such. Teachers have what I said, the pedagogical adaptations for online classes. They have been using PowerPoint, audiovisual presentations. These have become normal for the teachers also. And including senior educationists, they are forced to learn the use of technology, which actually they were not comfortable. Even a subject like your humanities, social sciences, all have to resort to this. Even sciences also. And secondly, is that the teachers have to really they have to be creative. They have to be creative in how they teach and engage students. Because even Professor Vikas Singh also said, teaching is one part of it, but engaging students is very, very important in the new norm which we find, because we have to keep the students engaged and attentive in all the deliberations. And but I said the traditional role of teachers has been disrupted, and there's a need for teachers training in pedagogy, which I think this FDP is going to achieve to some extent. Those who are participating will definitely be given exposure, whether it is the HR analytics or it is what's called the consumer behavior post-pandemic and all that, all these tools which they can use really say make the teaching more effective and engaging. And even if you see the NEP 2020, which people have been talking about, and the 1 year has already passed, there's a provision in that also, which basically is trying to look at that how teachers can be trained and retrained to prepare themselves for that change which is going to happen. And the COVID pandemic actually has really brought a new dimension to it, because what we find is that the changes which are being brought in by the NEP 2020, which is going to change the whole landscape itself. Like say, if we look at the school education, it is going to be modeled around what's called as a 5 plus 3 plus 3 plus 4. And then after that, we look at the graduation, which is again going to be of 3 years and 4 years, the fourth year devoted to the research domain. Again, post graduation, we say 1 year or 2 year, right? So that means we have to really accept these challenges, not only in the context of COVID-19 pandemic, but also in the context of NEP 2020, which is going to transform the way we have been, say, conducting all these teaching systems, because we are talking of another dimension apart from this these changes in the structure of the courses and the program, the pedagogical changes which actually are going to happen, because talking of the industry regulation 4.0, where digitalization and automation is basically the key. So we need to really train and embed our curriculum with those tools which are going to really be the digital tools, which are going to be the most important tools in the current scenario, right? And if you see the long-term impact which you find of this change, whether it is the NEP or it is the COVID-19, which are going to change, faculty needs to adapt the task-disciplinary approach. And this task-disciplinary adaptation brings business education close to liberal arts. That means we are talking of a very different curriculum, pedagogy, and conventional thinking has to go away. So business schools need to really come out with a new say mode of teaching, learning processes, teaching learning contents, and not only that, even what we call as in the new era of the NEP, we are going to really see a flexibility of the curriculum to being chosen by the students. That means we call as choice-based system. That means a student has the complete freedom to choose the courses which he want to study. They may be from liberal arts stream, they may be from physics, they may be from law, they may be from management. I think this is what actually is going to change the whole landscape. And the entire thinking process has to go, what I mentioned, of school of liberal arts. That means we're talking of liberation of mind, and the teaching process also has to match and align itself with that. Definitely, we find that this FDP, which I personally feel is, again, I think just to make a reference about NEP 2020, there's a specific clause 13, which says in the context of higher education, that the most important factor in the success of higher education is the quality and engagement of its faculty. So realizing this, they have also the NEP has also recommended that there should be a specific body which is supposed to train, retrain, and prepare teachers for in the teaching in the technology domain. And there's a specific provision in the whole NEP itself. It's called NETF. It's called National Educational Technology Forum, which is going to operate as an autonomous body under the government, and this is going to facilitate the entire process of induction, deployment, and use of technology by the teachers, by the education institutions, and all the stakeholders also. So I think the country is set to really take up all these challenges. The teachers are also ready for that, and I think this kind of events, which we call as the FDPs, which are actually the primary tool for transformation and preparing the teachers for accepting these challenges in the pedagogical way, in the content part of it, the subject matters. I think this FDP is going to play very important role, and I'm sure all the participants who are going to attend it will definitely have large number of takeaways from it. And this is possible because what Professor Vikas Singh also said, I think everybody has to really work. Unless there's a passion involved in that, nothing will succeed. And that is what our Prime Minister yesterday has added one more dimension to his slogan, what's called, initially it was Sabka Saath, Sabka Vikas, Sabka Vishwas. And now yesterday he has added another dimension, which is called Sabka Prayas. So without prayas and the passion, nothing is going to succeed. So with these words, I would like to say end and compliment the organizers and the conveners that they will definitely make the experience of the participants very, very learning experience. Thank you so much and all the best.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. Very truly, you said that Sabka Saath, Sabka Vikas, and now Sabka Prayas. Sir, you truly enlightened us, and very truly, you said that online teaching is challenging, absence of gurus aura, but very meticulously you explained the benefits of online teaching also, like it saves times in traveling, flexibility of scheduling the classes as per the convenience, and student can take the recording, so there is no absence of lecture. And blended mode of teaching, you also emphasizes on that UGC is now looking after 40% of blended online teaching. You very meticulously talked about NEP. So, sir, thanks again for your kind words of wisdom to the session, and it will also help us in outshining in our domain. Thank you, sir. Thank you so much, sir. Okay, let's proceed with the session. Over to you, Neha.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. I would once again, would like to express my sincere gratitude to our both the chief guests for the valuable and insightful inaugural to this session. We are really pleased to have esteemed presence of both the chief guests today, Dr. Vikas Singh and Dr. A.K. Saini. Thank you so much, sir. Thanks a lot. Okay, so here we go, proceeding with the session. Firstly, I hope all the participants and the loved ones are safe and doing well in the pandemic. COVID-19 has not only disrupted human lives, but all the sectors of society globally. It has also disrupted the education sector. But being optimistic, I truly believe what Albert Einstein said, that there is an opportunity in every crisis. And this pandemic has altogether brought the revolution in the education sector by adopting technology in every aspect of the institution. Wishing all the participants a very great learning experience. Moving forward with the schedule, we have our first resource person, Dr. Kirti Mishra from IIM Udaipur. Kirti is an assistant professor at Indian Institute of Management IIM Udaipur in organizational behavior and human resource management area. She graduated with a PhD from Monash University, Australia, an early career researcher who has previously held appointments at IIM Lucknow, Monash University, Swinburne University, and University of Queensland. Her area of research predominantly focuses on corporate sustainability, organizational responses to climate change, and strategizing for grand challenges. Dr. Kirti's research work has been presented at multiple European Group of Organization Studies and Academy of Management conferences and published in the Australasian Journal of Environment Management and the South Asian Journal of Human Resource Management, among others. On request, Dr. Kirti accepted to deliberate on case method for management education, which is truly as much the need of the hour for students to develop critical thinking and decision-making skills and practical implication of the theory. So I would request Dr. Kirti to take over. Over to you, Kirti. Dr. Kirti? Pankaj sir, I think, yeah, Dr. Kirti. Dr. Kirti, am I audible?
Hello.
Hello. Yes, you are audible.
Good morning. Thank you so much, Neha, for giving me this opportunity to share whatever little I think I have learned about case study methodology. So since we sort of have stepped into this FDP with this idea of online teaching, so there are two aspects to the session today. One is obviously learning about the case study methodology, but the second objective that we can actually engage in is this idea of online teaching. And one of the things that I really use very much in my class is the chat function. Because it's not really possible in an online setup to listen to all of your students. But we want, we're moving towards, as we learned, right, student-centric learning. So active participation from our students becomes a necessity. And personally, I've found that the chat function is a fantastic tool when you're trying to engage with your students. So I'm going to do that as well. So people, please feel free to type in the chat box. There will be times when I will specifically ask you a question, and it would be great if you could share your thoughts, insights, or comments on the chat box. Now, I won't be able to read all of the comments and respond to them, but I will surely try my best. And I'll try to get some themes from what you are writing in the chat box, and we'll talk about them. So what have I planned for today is firstly understanding what is this case study method, and let me sort of put a disclaimer out there. The case study method or the methodology that I'm going to be discussing today or talking about is heavily influenced by the Harvard case study method. Reason being that it's a tried, tested methodology. I have been introduced to that as a student, and I've also been using it as an instructor. So heavily influenced by the Harvard School methodology. This is not to say that there aren't different methods or different ways of going about a case study, but the one that I'm drawing upon is the Harvard School methodology. So first, we're going to spend some time understanding what is a case, what are some of the elements of a case study method. And then what does it mean by teaching a case study in class? Because case study methodology, the fundamental principle driving it is student participation. And in this case, the role of the instructor changes a lot. This is not our traditional monologue way of teaching. We can't go there and read. We cannot give a lecture. So what is, what are the different roles that a teacher or a lecturer or an instructor or a faculty needs to go through? So we're going to talk about that. I'll also discuss some ways in which we can implement the case study method. We also have planned a simulation exercise wherein I think hopefully all of you have received the case study. So I'll just go through how I take my class, my sessions through a case study. And then finally, we'll have some time for deliberations, for discussions, and some questions and answers. So I'm just going to try and see if I can share my screen. Yep. Microsoft Teams, just bear with me. Is my screen visible?
Yes, very much visible.
Right. So this is what I was talking about. This is the design of our lesson. Now, as I was saying, I am someone who always begins my classes with a session plan so that the participants, the students, are aware what is going to happen. So the first thing is, what is the case and what is this case study methodology that we're talking about? So essentially, the case is a description of a business problem or a business situation. This is something that could have happened, So it could be something that has happened in reality, and researchers have gone, they've talked to a businessman, they've talked to an organization, and they've written about this case study. Or it can actually be a fictional account as well. So the case doesn't necessarily have to be a real situation. It can sometimes also be a fictional account. We find that a lot of case studies these days are also fictional accounts. However, the common thing here is that it has to be about a business situation or a problem, because case study is nothing but a simulation for our students. I'm sure a lot of us are teaching students who've just finished their undergraduation, maybe engineering, and they've come to an MBA class or a management school. They actually don't have any experience, or they've never really ventured into what is a business, what does a manager do, what does sales look like. So to give them a feel for what really happens in a business, we use case study methodology as a simulation exercise. So it's always about a business situation or a business problem. If we look at cases these days, earlier we used to see that people used to rely on using a lot of thick cases, 30 to 40 pages long. But now there's a change in the trend, and we see that a lot of the cases which are being published and used are in the range of 10 to 15 pages. Now, selection of the case is something which will have to be determined by the instructor. It cannot be done in hindsight. The case should be decided, or the cases should be decided when you are designing your course outline. So you start with what are the objectives, what are the learning outcomes, and then you think what could be the appropriate case. Also, it's not necessary that every lesson that we have should have a case attached to it. Again, think about what is the learning outcome, and is case methodology the best way to achieve that particular learning outcome. So in a typical case, this is what we find. We find there are facts. You'll find a lot of financial information about the organization. You'll find a lot of information about the strategy, vision, mission, things like that. You'll find opinions of people. Cases, they're like stories. So there's a lot of there's protagonists. There is a business leader. There's competition, and we find their opinions. And there's also a lot of operating information. That is, how does the business work? How does the competition work, etc. So there's a lot of information that we find in our cases. One of the other things that we need to understand when we are going with the case study methodology is the outcome of case study method is never to come to the correct solution. And this is where I think it's important to get this message across to our students in the very beginning. We actually don't want to come to the best solution. What we want to do is we want to develop a very comprehensive understanding of what has happened and how complex the reality of businesses really is. And in this case, right, it really is. The journey is what we desire. The journey is really more important than the destination. So the analysis, the communication, the teamwork that happens during the case methodology is what we are looking for. And many a times it happens, it happens with my students also. They get really, they get really excited about the case study, but all they focus on is achieving the correct solution. And you will see them, harassing me after class and asking, was my answer the best? Is that what the company did in the end? And I always tell them that there are multiple answers in a case. There is no one correct solution. The idea is that we deliberate on the different kinds of solutions which are possible. So it's really important that we establish this particular, this expectation needs to be set from the very beginning, that case studies do not have one correct solution. There are many solutions, and we need to show our analysis. We need to show our critical thinking in going through all those different solutions. So like I said, the process of analysis, the process of understanding the case is the real learning, not whether my answer was correct or is this really what the company did in the end. That is not the output we are desiring. So in terms of what are the skills that we really get out of case study method, and why is it that people keep following case study methodology, is the first skill that it teaches us or our students is decision making, right? It introduces them to a real business problem, which had to be resolved by business managers, by business leaders. It takes them through the process that another person has taken. It introduces them to the complexities, the systemic ideas that they need to be aware of when they are making decisions. It helps them in developing problem solving. Most of the case studies that we give in our business schools are problem solving kind of case studies, where they see how a business has resolved the problem, whether it has done it in a good way, whether it has done it in a bad way, what can we learn from that. And finally, teamwork. Collaboration is a key skill that we want, especially in our business school graduates. So during case study methodology, we see that there's a lot of emphasis that needs to be put on teamwork. And I'll talk about how we can ensure teamwork when we are designing our lesson plans, because this is a strength of case study methodology. You learn individually, but you also learn with your peers. So these are the three critical skills. And in fact, if you pick up any World Economic Forum report which talks about skills required, you'll find that these skills are always talked about. So this is also a hook that I use for my own students, that why is it that we teach you case study methodology? Because these three critical skills are best taught using the case study method. So what is the purpose of case studies? Why is it that we use case studies so much in our teaching? Like I said, first one is, it is a simulation. Something has happened in business life and we are talking about it. We push our students, right, that think from the protagonist's point of view, get into their shoes, understand the realities, the complexities that a business manager is going to face in their daily lives. Understanding complexity, that every decision that you take depends on so many other factors, and the outcomes are not always in your control. So case studies also help our students learn about complexity. Decision making, public speaking skills are also very important, and we can teach them through case study. It also tells our students to make business decisions, business judgment. One of the key things that my students learn through case studies is that we can never have perfect information and we can never make perfect decisions, right? And this is through different case studies they learn that as a manager, you will always have some information that you'll always have something that's missing. So what we do is we make the best decisions at the time given the information that we have. So that kind of business judgment is really well taught through case studies. And also understanding diverse viewpoints, because when we do case study analysis in our classrooms, we have 60 people, and all these 60 people have different viewpoints. They have different interpretations of what happened and what should have been, what should have been done. So working in a team, working in that collaborative environment, understanding case analysis, it helps our students understand diverse viewpoints. It teaches them to mostly, respect diverse viewpoints, and it also opens, it broadens their minds, wherein, okay, here's one way of looking at things, that how I understood this case study, but my friend has understood this case study and a problem in a completely different manner. So understanding and living with different viewpoints is also a strength of case study methodology. So as an instructor, why should we use cases? Because we have right now so many cases which cut across different companies, different sectors, different functions. So imagine how rich our content can be made, right? If I want to teach them about banking and finance sector, I can pick up case studies about banking and finance sector. If I want to look at retail, I can focus on retail. If I want to talk about digitization, I can use case studies which are talking about digitization. It helps them understand the context, especially for our students in India, where we don't have the concept of going for work experience or working before you start with your higher education. Case studies help them understand the complexities of the business environment. It also opens our students up to being challenged by their peers, because like I said, in a case study methodology, it's not just the instructor who's asking them questions, but they're also being questioned by their peers. And this is a skill which really helps them once they move into the corporate world. It gives meaning, and it makes people really passionate. Like I shared, there have been times when I've had to actually calm down my students, because they get so involved. They think, okay, I know everything about this company, and if I were the manager, I'm going to do this. So there's a lot of emotional involvement, and you really get a lot of student engagement through case study methodology. So students do find it very exciting and fulfilling. In fact, there are certain times you can also use cases which they have heard of, so they know that what happened, and they're very eager to sort of fix the problem. Or they couldn't think of it, but look, this is, I'm so smart that I'm going to, if I was there, I could have really fixed the problem. So because of all these reasons, case study methodology, which was developed way back, Harvard developed it way back in early, I think 1910, 1920, and we still continue to use it because of the various advantages that I have just talked about. Now, the learning process, and this is where the design of the lesson plan becomes really critical for us. When we think of a case study methodology as instructors, as faculty, we need to understand that there are 3 steps of learning that will happen. There is individual learning, and there's small group learning, and then finally the big classroom learning. So let me go through these steps and help you also see where the lesson planning comes. Individual learning. Every student has to read and understand and interpret the case study on their own. So when I'm writing my course outline, I actually mention the total number of hours which a student needs to put in before coming to the class. And this becomes imperative. Case study methodology is not going to work if our students think that they can come into the classroom and read the case study there. That's not going to work. So this is an expectation which we need to set with our students. Come what may, the individual reading and understanding of the case study has to happen before the class, right? So they'll read it on their own. They identify what are the challenges, what is this case study about. For students who are doing this for the first time, I actually create a template and share with them. It's a very simple template. I give them 5 questions that when you are reading the case study on your own, you need to understand who's the protagonist, what is this case study about, what are the problems, what is the reason for those problems, and how will you solve those problems. So those 5 things, or I give them as a template, but you need to read the case study before you come into my class. So create that kind of a contract, create that psychological contract with your students. Make it clear from day one, case reading is not going to happen in the classroom. The classroom is a place for discussion. It's not a place for you to read the case study. So a lot of emphasis on pre-classroom learning. The second learning should happen in small groups. And there are different ways of doing this. I follow 2 methodologies. Sometimes I do this before class. So beginning of the term, beginning of the semester, I divide my entire class into small groups. And then I expect them that they need to, after they've done the individual learning, they need to discuss their answers in their small group. And as I'm sure many of the faculty members here would agree with me, just telling our students what they have to do doesn't necessarily translate into actions. So what I do is to, sort of scare them a little bit. I tell them that in the class, I can call on any group, right? Cold calling is a great method. I can call on any group to present in the classroom. So because of that sort of, that sort of a cold calling approach, students do end up working in their small groups also. So this is a method for before class, but sometimes what I do even in the classroom, I might actually divide them. The first 15 minutes of my case study analysis, what I will do is I'll divide them into groups and I'll ask them to deliberate whatever they discussed, whatever they learned as an individual to now discuss in a small groups. And again, the same thing. Sometimes I actually pick groups and I ask them to come and teach with me. Right? I tell them that you are actually going to drive the case analysis with me in the class. So that makes them more disciplined and it makes them more focused when they are working in their small groups. And finally, the mass learning. This is where the instructor, the faculty is now driving the discussion, driving the analysis with the entire class. So this is definitely going to happen in the classroom, and most of our lesson planning is going to be focused around this mass learning point, and I'm going to talk about it in my next slides. So remember that case study method requires a lot of pre-class effort from our students. Therefore, it is a good idea to have it formalized in our course outlines, and also to set this expectation from the very beginning with our students, that if we are going to use the case study method, we're supposed to read the case study individually, then in your small groups, and then we discuss things in our class. So pre-class and in class, both these are going to work together in order for the case study methodology to be effective. So some essentials, right? When you're making your lesson plan, what are some things that you said? Like I said, pre-class learning, in-class participation, I've already talked about it. Now the third one, I think, is the difficult part, but it is also the most fun part. What is the role of the instructor in a case study methodology, right? The students have already read the case, they've already interpreted it, they've also discussed it in our small group. So what am I doing, right? As a faculty, does this mean great, now I can sit back, enjoy, have a fun ride, have a cup of chai, in the classroom, or online, even better, now I can turn off my video, let the students discuss? Unfortunately, that's not the way it is. Case study method requires an instructor to really work very hard in terms of how the analysis is going to work out, right? So it's not a monologue. I cannot, as faculty, when you're talking about case study methods, you can't just stay back and you have your pre-written notes, and we can't deliver the notes. Remember, I said there is no one correct answer in a case study. There are multiple correct answers. So how do I actually go through all those different answers? So, actually the kind of instructional delivery that we require for a case study requires more time and planning than a traditional lecture. My personal experience has been that lecturing is easy, because in a lecture, you're in command, you're in control of what is happening all the time. I know what I have got to talk about. But because of the dialogical nature of case study analysis, we don't always have control. We have to keep, you're listening to what the students are saying. You also have your plan. At the end of the day, you want to make sure that the outcomes that you desired from the case study are being reached. There will always be some students who are so interested that they will try to steer the conversation into a completely different side. I have had students sometimes who will immediately open up Google and they will start throwing facts at you in the classroom, that this is what has happened to the case since then. So we have to discipline them also. You have to ensure that everybody in the class is participating. You also have to ensure that the students are not fighting among themselves, right? That the whole atmosphere is still very respectful, and still we are learning from that particular exercise. So the delivery, or the role of the instructor is very crucial. And in many ways, we have to we have to play multiple roles, is what I think is required when you are thinking of a case study plan. This is not to say that the case study discussion is very unstructured. That's not true. However, it's just that the structure needs to be flexible, because students might come back with something that you didn't think of. So I'll share with you an example. I have given you the Robin Hood case study. It's a one-page case study, and I have been sort of discussing that same case study with my students. I use that for orientation, and I've been doing it for the past 3 years. And every single year, there's always a group of students who come up with a novel problem, a problem that I had not identified. So I have to be flexible enough to actually be able to listen to the new problems being brought by the students and discuss those in the classroom. But at the same time, I also have developed my teaching notes and I think as one of the chief guests rightly pointed out, the teaching notes or the lesson plan for your case studies need to be very, very comprehensive, right? As instructors, we need to be on top of all the facts, the figures that are presented in the case study. Then we need to think about what are the different problems, right? Case studies are quite dense. They won't have one problem. They're going to have multiple problems. So as instructors, we need to highlight what are these different problems. Do I want my students to discuss all of that? Do I even have the time to discuss all of those problems? So do I want my students to only focus on 3 problems in that case? If that's what I want, how do I steer the conversation of my students around those 3 problems? So what kind of questions do I ask? So a key, one of the ways in which we start asking questions in a case study method is you start by asking broad questions. That gets everybody comfortable, and people obviously they know who, so broad questions like who's the protagonist? What is this case about? What is the industry about? Okay, does the case tell us anything about the competitive nature of the environment? So I teach organizational dynamics. So a lot of things have to do with culture, the structure of the organization, the strategy of the organization. So those are the, by the way of asking questions, I bring my students towards the discussion that I want them to have. So you see that there is a dynamic, right? There's an interplay between me driving the discussion, but also giving flexibility to my students to share their insights. And there are times when one student will give you a completely, very out of the box point, or a very, very out of the box deliberation. And if I don't have the time in class, I usually say, that's fine, that's a brilliant point, I didn't think of it, but we are going to car park it. And maybe if we have time in the class, I'll discuss it, or I'll discuss with you offline, I'll discuss with you one-on-one, because that's an important point. So there's things that we need to be aware of, and class timing, what is the concept that you might want to teach? Maybe you just want to focus on culture. However, the case study will definitely talk about structure and strategy also. So you might want to focus the discussion only on the cultural aspects in the case study. And that's something that we can do through our planning. So this is where I wanted to bring your attention to what is the role of faculty, or what is the role of instructor. And you will see here that I have around 8 roles that I have written here. And this is where like I said, and I personally believe that the case study method requires more from the teachers, more from the faculty than a typical lecture style of teaching. And this is the reason why. Because in your class, right, maybe you have 1 hour session, or you have 1 hour and 15-minute session. In that session, you are required to wear 8 different hats in order for the session to be successful. So I'll briefly go through these different roles that one has to play. So the first one is you're almost running an orchestra, because things need to be choreographed. What is the discussion going to be around? Since my session is only on culture, I want all the discussion to be focused around culture. So what is going to be my starting question? And at the end of the analysis, at the end of the class, 1 hour, 1 hour, 15 minutes, there has to be an outcome of this for the students. What have the students learned about organization culture from this particular case study? So we have to orchestrate, right? We have to plan what is going to happen. We need to have our questions ready. What are the broad questions? What are the narrow questions that I'm going to be asking? You have to facilitate, right? Different groups, different individuals need to get a chance to speak, need to get a chance to share what was their interpretation of the case study. We don't want one student to be taking over the entire discussion. You also have to play the role of the ship captain. Like I said, sometimes students will get really, really interested, but they would also try to drive the discussion away from what you had planned, right? somebody will find some interesting thing on Google and they will only want to discuss it. Or, somebody will say that I actually knew somebody who was working in this particular company and this is what they told me. Now, that's an interesting facet, but it's going to derail our case study discussion. It's going to derail our lesson plan. So as just like, we would navigate. So the instructor also has to bring back people, right? So a lot of times I tell my students, that's a fantastic idea. That's a great thing that you have just said. However, we were talking about organization culture. So let's get back, right? So it's not that they were wrong. It's just that I need to focus on this particular idea, because otherwise we will just keep traveling and we will never reach the outcome that we desire. We also have to play the role of a judge, because students are going to come up with different viewpoints. So which viewpoint should I pay attention to? Which viewpoint should I ask others to actually stress upon or to elaborate? So this is where the knowledge of the case study and the knowledge of the concept that you are trying to teach is going to become very crucial. There will be certain points that you will decide not to focus on, and there will be certain aspects which, based on your lesson plan, based on your course objectives, are going to become crucial. So in my case, when I'm teaching them about organization culture, we use Sheen's model as a concept. So for me, when I am judging the questions, when I am judging what the students are saying, if students are talking about Sheen's model, then I elaborate on those points. I ask them to give me examples of that point. So that's where the judgment has to come from. We also have to play the role of an actor. And of course, the world is a stage. Our lives are stage. So obviously, sometimes case study might feel like a bit overwhelming for the students. Like I said, there are case studies which are 30 to 40 pages long. So there's a lot of information. So to keep their interest going, right? Using non-verbal cues, using the space in the classroom. So for example, what I do is I tend to walk a lot. I'll stand in the center of my classroom so that everybody can see what I'm doing. Sometimes what you might do is if there is a conversation, for example, in the case study, you might want to actually emulate that conversation, right? That if I am the man, this is what the manager says, and I'm going to be the manager right now. So just to keep our students engaged and make the case more relatable. We also have to play the role of a psychologist, especially in Indian classrooms. We find our students have come from all parts of the country and they have been exposed to different kinds of education backgrounds and systems. So it becomes really important for us to pay attention to that. There will be some introverts in the class who might not want to speak up, but they might as well have really great points. So how do we encourage those introverts to speak up? What if somebody makes a point and others in the classroom start laughing at that point? How do I protect that student from everyone else? Students who are not very confident in English, how do we encourage them to speak up? These are all the factors that as an instructor we need to work on. Sometimes during discussions, things get heated up. Students get really emotional. They get emotionally attached to the case. Again, the role of a psychologist comes there, understanding the emotions of the students in a classroom. Then playing the role of a traffic officer, right? What points will be discussed in elaboration? What are the points that we are not going to talk about completely, right? So sometimes when we have case studies and they talk about technology, a lot of engineers in my class, they actually forget the organizational side of things and they start discussing about the technology, whether the technology was good or not. So I have to be a traffic police person there and I have to stop, that's a complete no. There is a red sign there. We are not going to discuss the technology. This is an organizational dynamics class and we're going to talk about structure and culture and people. We're not going to talk about whether the technology in itself was good or bad. And finally, the role of a coach. And this sometimes is also going to extend out of the classroom. We will have students who have probably misinterpreted the case. right? Or their answers to the questions that you were asking them, they're not, the critical thinking is not being demonstrated there. They're not using the evidence in the cases, right? So cases are full of information. There's a lot of evidence. So every time you make a point or you make an argument, you make an assertion, you should use the evidence that is given in the case. And sometimes we'll have students who don't need, who are not very good at linking what they're studying in the case and what is the evidence in the case. So in those cases, we also need to coach our students. The reason I share the template with my students is because I felt a lot of students, when they are exposed to case study method for the first time, they actually don't know what to do, right? You've just given me 40 pages of something. How do I make sense of it? So that's where I give them a template for individual reading, so they know how can I structure my thoughts. So this is where the coaching is also going to come into picture. Some of the coaching will happen in class, where you will tell a student, that's a great point, however, you have not really given me the right example, or you have not given me the right evidence. Or when you start elaborating on your point, we realize that your argument is not as strong as you thought it to be. And some of the coaching is going to happen outside of the class. So I don't want to sort of overwhelm all of you as well. But just in summary, there are two things that I want you to take from whatever I have just shared. Case study is a very dialogical method of teaching. It doesn't mean that I can just go into my classroom and start talking and students can discuss whatever they want to. In fact, it requires more effort, more planning from the instructor. And there is constantly going to be an interplay between the plan that you have and the things that the students are also going to bring in to your classroom. So there has to be, right? The students have to be open-minded, and the instructor is also going to be open-minded. So this is a very, very different approach compared to the lecture mode or the monologue sort of a approach that we traditionally see being followed in our classrooms. It is difficult, but it is doable, and it is a skill. And I think the more you start using the case study methodology, the better you're going to get at it. And also you're going to find your teaching fun, right? Every time I teach a case, I come back and I have learned something new about that particular case, because some students, have brought in a perspective which I also didn't think of. So as an instructor, as a faculty, also I can share from my personal experience that while it requires a lot of effort and planning, I think that what you get in return is much more, right? We get a lot of student engagement. Student love case study analysis. And as an instructor also, you always learning, you're always, you're always on your feet, constantly listening to what the students are saying and trying to make sense of it. So that's the reason why I encourage case study methodology. Here are some of the things, I know this is a FDP and we're talking about faculty. However, like I said, case study methodology is a method where the students and the teachers work together. So we need to understand what are the roles of the students. What is it that the students need to do in order to be prepared for the right kind of analysis, the right kind of discussion. And in fact, I shared this with my students in the very first class, that these are the expectations I have from you. So students need to really think from the perspective of the protagonist in the case study, right? So think if you were, if you were Nirav Modi, or think if you were actually Elon Musk, right? You have to think from that perspective. This is what they have to do. So this is the kind of template that I share with my students. They need to identify problems which are there in the case study. They need to look at the data. Most of the case studies will have qualitative as well as quantitative data, and our students need to understand that data and make inferences from that. They need to think of many solutions, and then I push them to think of, pick one solution and tell me why you have picked that, right? So give me recommendations, pick up a recommendation and tell me why you have done that. and also plan for contingencies, right? So I make them do a bit of a feasibility analysis, that how feasible is the recommendation or the solution that you have given me. And creative thinking is welcomed. We want our students to think outside of the box, right? So sometimes I do encourage them that if you want, you can use the internet, you can look at what was happening to the company at that time, if it's a historical case, what is happening to the industry now. So all of that creative thinking is also welcomed in the class. And I share this, these points are shared with my students at the very beginning of the term. So they know that this is, how case study, I think this is really important. We as instructors need to learn that case study methodology is different, but our students also need to learn, so that they, we have the right expectations from them, that this is not going to be based, this is not going to be a lecture where you can just sit, take notes and go back. Also, in case study, like I said, it's a very open discussion based methodology. It's a pedagogy that welcomes perspectives from students. However, all the points, or all the sort of insights which are shared by the students, they have to be based on sound reasoning. So I have a rule in my class wherein one word answers or one word sentences are not welcomed. So you have to explain. You can't just say, why didn't he fire XYZ? You give me a reason why you are saying that firing a particular person is going to help the organization. Why do you think so? Have you thought about what would be the ramifications of firing a CEO, for example? So one word, I always tell them this is not multiple choice. You have to elaborate your answers. You have to give me examples. So that's a rule I have for my case study discussion. One word answers, one sentence answers are not going to be appreciated. You need to elaborate your points. You need to elaborate what you are saying. So this is what we essentially, come to, that case study is nothing but a real situation, which is going to, it has either been faced by an organization or an individual. And as a class, right, the students have done their analysis, and now we do our analysis in the class, and we're mostly trying to help our protagonist arrive at a decision. And we go through that process, right? These are the multiple answers that we can have. What are the pros and cons of different answers, and what would be the best of all the solutions that we have? How will it be implemented, etc. So because of these, because of the fact that a case study is a simulation of what would happen in a business life, we find that it's one of the best methods, especially for management graduates, to develop an understanding of what is really happening in the business world. Now, before I go on, I actually had we had a simulation planned for you, but before we go on, are there any questions? Are there any questions? Are there any comments, or is there anything that is not clear and you would like me to elaborate on some point? Let's do a bit of a Q&A, because I think I have been in a lecture mode for too long.
We have 3 hands raised up. So
Sure.
can I take the question?
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay. I would unmute Dr. Reena. Dr. Reena, I have allowed you to unmute yourself and you can put up your query. Dr. Reena Williams, are you there?
Thank you so much.
Yeah, please. Dr. Reena, ma'am, do you have any question? Your hands were up, so I thought maybe. Dr. Reena?
Hello.
Yes, Dr. Reena.
Yeah, I was unable to send any messages because it says that you're
Yeah.
not a member of the chat. So I
Okay.
found it No, but otherwise, I really found I got many answers to my questions.
Okay.
Thank you so much. Thank you so
Okay,
much.
that's great. Thank you. Now I would unmute Dr. Deep. Dr. Deep Sikha, you can unmute yourself, and if you have any query, you can put up to the Dr. Kirti. Dr. Deep. Okay. Next we have Dr. Anand. Dr. Anand, you can unmute yourself. If you have any query, your hands, when you have raised your hand. Okay, Dr. Kirti, I think we can proceed.
Sure.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Right. So in the next 10 to 15 minutes, this is a very truncated version of how I would discuss a case study in my class. So hopefully you all received the case, which is a Robin Hood case study. It's a very small case study. In fact, it's something that we call a caselet because it's only one page. So I'm just going to take you through how I go about analyzing this particular case in my class. The courses that I teach focus a lot, as I said previously, on organization culture, structure, and organizational design. So essentially, I put this picture in front of my students, right? And I ask them, what do you think is going on here? And most of them say that this is, some sort of a medical practice is going on. Maybe post-mortem, there is some sort of a dissection going on. So you get all of those answers from your students. And that is in fact correct, right? So what we see in this picture is dissecting what has happened. Something has happened in the past, right, because of which this person has died. And what we're doing now is we're going through the layers of the human body to understand what could have been the reason for death in this particular case. And we see that somebody has taken the role of probably the main dissector here. He could be the doctor. And we also see that there's a group of peers who are probably asking questions. Somebody has a piece of paper in their hand, so they're trying to help, or maybe they're writing down what's going on. So we're working collaboratively, and we're trying to understand, we're trying to learn what was the reason for this person's death. And this is the analogy that we use when we are doing case study analysis. It's very similar to a dissection, right? You're going through the facts, you're going through the figures, you're going through the story which has been told you in the case study, and you're trying to understand what has happened, right? And we work with people, because the reality of managerial life is that you always work in teams. You're always trying to work together to identify what has gone wrong. Did something happen in the past? Can we learn something from what happened in the past? So this particular, when I start my session with this particular slide, it gets my students sort of primed towards what are we doing today. What we're doing is a dissection. We're looking at something which happened really, really back in time, and we're trying to understand what can we learn from it for today. So after this, I asked them about the case, which is the Robin Hood case, and what are we dissecting today. At this moment, I usually ask a few of my students to briefly summarize the case for me, right? So very open-ended question. I ask them, tell me what's this case about, what's happening. And there's no points for guessing. It's mostly, so this is cold calling. And I mostly pick students whom I have found to be a bit quiet in class, or ours is a residential campus, so you see students all the time. So if I had seen them last night drinking chai and not really studying, then I pick on those students and I ask them to sort of tell me very broadly what are we doing in class. Now, for individual analysis, this is what I ask them to do. Sometimes I actually give them 5 minutes in my class to write these down in a piece of paper. In the online format, what I do is I ask my students to write the answers to these 4 questions in the chat function. And then I, sort of keep reading them and we discuss them. So who are the key players? Who is the protagonist? What are the main challenges that Robin Hood is struggling with? And what are some of the causes for those challenges and problems? So the first 2 questions are very simple. They clearly, they say it's Robin Hood, it's the people, it's the merryman that he's working with, it's the sheriff who is looking at. When I ask who's the protagonist, obviously a lot of them pinpoint to Robin Hood, and they discuss many challenges, right? So they discuss challenges like there's a food problem, there's shortage of food, there's a financial problem because there's no, there's not too much money to be looted anymore. There are certain personal issues also that Robin Hood is facing because the size of his group, the size of his merrymen has increased so much that he doesn't really know them. And then, students, when I ask them what are the underlying causes, they usually tell me that, um, it's just that these are growth problems. The organization is growing and that's why things are getting out of hand. He probably needs more structure. Some people also talk about the role of competition. The sheriff has actually become much, much stronger than he used to be. So Robin Hood needs to sorry, did somebody have a question? Oh, sorry. So yeah, competition problem because the sheriff has now actually become more powerful, and that's why Robin Hood, he really needs to think about what is he going to do. Now the second part is, after the individual analysis, teamwork, because managerial life, you cannot be successful unless you know how to work in teams. So what I do is I get my students to work in groups, and this is usually what I do. In our MBAs, we have around 60 to 65 students in each section. So what I do is I break them into 8 to 10 groups. If in the online format, you can use either Zoom, the breakout room function, or you can also use Google Meet, in which we can create smaller groups. So this is all part of the pre-planning. Like my groups are already formed. If it's online, then all you need to do is have your Excel sheet ready. If it's online, then also I have the names of my students ready and I share them with the students in classroom so that we don't waste too much time. The third point is something that I started doing because of the online nature of our delivery. So usually when things were offline, what I would do is, we have a lot of whiteboards in our classroom. So I would ask every group to write down their deliberations, to write down their key points on the whiteboard, and then we would read it out loud. But what to do in an online platform? So what I use is I use Google Documents a lot. Every group has access to their Google document, and whatever they're discussing in their virtual groups, they need to write it down on that Google document. And of course, I have access to all these Google documents. Now it does 2 things for me. The first thing is it keeps my students disciplined, right? When I go to their breakout rooms, you can always hear somebody saying, "Are likh do, ma'am dekhegi." So there is that tension ki ma'am is going to watch what I'm doing, and this is not just time for some chit chat, but this is time for discussing the case study. The second thing that it does is it's really actually good for my own learning also, because at the end of the class, I get really good points and all of them are in a digital format. So what I do is after every case discussion, I put all the group work together. Everything that was discussed by students, I make it into one document and I share it with the entire class. So they also learn what the others were thinking. So this intervention, I found it very useful when we are teaching online. In fact, in Google Documents, you can also make comments. So when I go, I go and make comments like, okay, this is a brilliant point. The students see that and they really like that positive appreciation from their instructor. So it's a very good tool that we can use when we are teaching online. I always ask my students to pick one presenter and one person who's going to take down notes. Like I said, I teach organizational dynamics. I teach about organizational management. So of course, it's really important that in every team, we must select who's going to do the presentation and who's going to take down notes. And these things keep changing, right? The responsibility keeps changing in a team. I give them time depending upon how long the session is going to be. And then I tell them that 5 groups will be picked at random and you are going to drive the case analysis with me. Because when you have 65 to 70 students in a class, it's not really possible to have all of their views and manage the class discussion. So I usually pick 5 groups and then I drive the mass discussion of the case study using what they are saying. And the good thing here is because they're writing it down, I can also structure my thoughts simultaneously because things are being written down for me. I can read them and I can know which are the points I need to stress on, what are the follow-up questions that that I need to ask. So during these 15 minutes, right, again, this is where case study methodology is very special and very unique. Those 15 minutes as an instructor, again, I can't sit back and tell my TA, jao chai leke aao ya samosa leke aao. I can't do that. Those 15 minutes, if it was offline, then I need to spend time with all the different groups. What are they discussing? What are the key themes? Are they on the right track? If they're not, then maybe I need to ask them a question and point them in the right direction. Oh, that's an interesting theme. Let me write it down on the whiteboard because we are going to discuss this as a larger group. So you're working a lot in that time when the students are working in their smaller groups. So use this time very strategically. In this particular case, mostly these are the points. So what I do is offline mode, I will write these down on the whiteboard. In the online, again, if you have access to an iPad, if you're using Zoom, sorry, I'll talk about Zoom because I use Zoom a lot, but you can use the screen as well to write these points down. So you will see here that I have actually picked out some themes. The first one is growth and evolution. The second is organization structure.
Dr. Kirti, I'm sorry to disturb you, sorry to interrupt. But we need to wind up the session in another 5 minutes if possible, ma'am.
Sure. So I'll just
Because
finish.
we have another speaker.
Sure.
That's
Right.
right.
Yeah.
Okay, ma'am. Ji.
So you will see here that I have 3 themes: growth and evolution, org structure, and organizational strategy. This is where the planning comes from. Now, these are the 3 themes that I teach them, right? This is actually coming from my course objective. That growth, evolution, structure, and strategy are key concepts in my particular course. So when my students are giving me answers that, the key issue was resource scarcity, organization change, I put them under the heading of organizational evolution. So this is nothing me but being the navigator, I'm the captain of this ship. So I am guiding you to think about organization growth and evolution. So similarly in your cases, whatever case you choose, please align it with the objectives, with the outcomes that you have designed for your course. And after every case study, we need to show this connection. Sometimes what happens, we get so lost in case analysis, right? Because it's a great story at the end of the day. It's a great story, and most likely it's a great story about something bad that didn't happen to me but happened to someone else. So we get even more excited. Kisi aur ke saath bura hua. So we forget, but what was the whole point of this case study? So it's really important that once your case analysis is done, after the entire class has deliberated and discussed, we bring it down and we show the linkage to the course objectives. So I clearly show the linkage that, listen, we were talking about structure. In this case study, what you find is a functional structure. And that's why you see the problems connected with centralized decision making. So I'm going to stop now because, as you heard, Neha pointed out that we're running a bit ahead of time because we did start the session late. So I'm going to stop here now. And if there are any questions, let's take those questions.
Okay, so we have one question from Dr.
Sure.
Malvika.
Right.
The question is that it was examination using case study discussed previously in the class. If yes, then the question should be directly related to the case study, or it should be application based to the theories and concepts that are being taught in the class.
So I always start with a very broad question in the beginning, and then I guide them to the application base. So I wouldn't start my Robin Hood case study discussion by saying, what do you know about the functional structure? But I ask them to give me all the problems, all the challenges, and then I guide them towards organizational structure, the functional structure, and the problems and advantages of following a functional structure. Because when you ask a broad question, in the very beginning, your participants will feel comfortable. There will always be some people who haven't read the case, so they'll also get a overview of what is really happening, um, and then it makes it a more richer learning experience than immediately pinpointing. And in fact, I will never say functional structure myself. I get my students to say it. You give them so many hints, you give them examples, and they will eventually say that out loud for themselves. So I don't. So that's my style of going through a case. I'm not going to say this is structure. I get them to link it with organization structure.
Okay, great, ma'am. So I would like to end the session now by thanking Dr. Kirti. Very insightful session, ma'am. And the decision making, problem solving, and teamwork, the three important critical skills that you discussed, really helps the students to develop these skills while doing a case study. Also, it was quite valuable which you shared, that pre-classroom learning in small groups, and thereafter mass learning of the case study through case studies. Very, very effective. Code calling approach is really brought out differences. And we as an instructor, as an academician, as teachers, we need to inculcate initiative of learning in our students. Then only the case study will be effective in the class doing the case studies. So thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you for such a wonderful insights which you shared on the topic. Thanks a lot, ma'am. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Neha.
Thank you,
And
ma'am.
just let the participants know if they would. I know there's a lot of questions on the chat, and I apologize for not being able to address them. But you can share my email ID, and I'll be more than happy to answer those questions.
Sure, definitely, ma'am. I'll share the email ID with the participants. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much for so kind of you. Thank you, ma'am. Okay, so let's proceeding with the session. And now I would request Dr. Vikas Bharara, Associate Professor, IITM Convener of the FDP, to introduce our next eminent speaker for the day. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Neha. Now for the next session, we have Dr. Arimbam from IIM Kozhikode. Well, sir, Dr. Arimbam has done his PhD on evolutionary game theory from the Department of Industrial Engineering and Operational Research from IIT Bombay. Sir has worked at the Interdisciplinary Statistical Research Unit of ISI, that is Indian Statistical Institute, Kolkata, as a visiting scientist. Also, his previous assignments includes as an assistant professor at IIM with Isaac, visiting professor at IIM Indore and IIM Amritsar also. Dr. Animbam's teaching interests are statistics, econometrics, game theory, and various versions of IT. His research interest lies in the application of game theory modeling in human behavioral domain, which is quite interesting. Sir is proficient in statistical modeling of business scenario using R, SPSS, as well as Python. Dr. Animbam is interested in epidemiological research and concentrates on result-oriented action-level analytics. Sir and his teams also developed a COVID tracker. If you want to visit, you can visit at www.iimb.ac.in/COVID tracker. Sir, it is our pleasure to have you on here. We welcome you, sir. Now we will have deliberation on gamification online teaching strategy. Over to you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. And can you hear me?
Yes, sir, you are audible.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks for your kind introduction. and thanks for inviting me for this National FDP 2021. It's my honor to be here. I will. I actually did not expect these many participants, which is really overwhelming for me. So it is really nice to see so many people here, and to address these many participants is very thrilling, to say the least. We started a bit late, so I will not, hold you for long. So I will start right away. And before I start, I would like to ask something to the participants. Maybe if you do not have to unmute or anything, you can just raise your hand and then withdraw that. So that I get an understanding of what is what the group of participants are. So I would like to ask, so is the idea of gamification you're familiar with? I mean, how many of you are familiar with the idea of gamification in classroom teaching? Can you please raise your hand, whoever is familiar with the idea? Okay. So I can see some. Okay, the number is still increasing. That's very nice. Fantastic. So I can see there are around right now 11 participants who are familiar with the idea. So that's great. So you can lower your hand from the app. So let me start. So in this talk, what I will do is, if I had, a day or something, I would actually I will convert this talk into a gamified talk. But it's not possible within such a short period because, and especially with so many participants. So I will rather not practically do it, but I will show what I have done. So first I will start with an idea of gamification and how it helps, or rather try to find out whether it helps or not. And then we'll move on to my personal experience and my personal practice when I do gamification. So it's rather largely divided into these two things. So let me share my content. Just give me a second. Can you see the content?
Yes, sir, it is visible.
Okay, fantastic. So I am not using a PowerPoint. I'm rather using Microsoft OneNote. So I will share the, I will share the link of this notebook so that participants can go through it at whenever they want. So just one second. I'm actually not very familiar with the Microsoft Teams UI, so I might fumble a bit. I'm really sorry for that. Anyway, so why are we talking about online teaching and gamification, it all started from, at the end of 2019 and beginning of 2020 when COVID attacked us. So social distancing had to be maintained. People are quarantined in their room. We have to reduce the spread of epidemics. So basically, the whole system of teaching got disrupted, and we had to basically overnight we had to shift to the distance education mode from our comfortable face-to-face mode. So it was a huge challenge, and not only a huge challenge for the teachers, it was a huge challenge for the students as well. We should not forget that part, that it was actually a huge challenge for the students to actually remain motivated, remain concentrated on the screen, and not there is no animated person who is walking around, running around, jumping around, shouting, whispering. No, there is nothing like that. There's just a screen, and it's like a video. And if it is me in front of the screen and there's someone just talking in, let's say, a monotonous voice like me, I would just sleep. So I had to do something. So that's when this gamification, so it's not me alone. A lot of people actually had faced this problem. So a great amount of work has started being devoted to develop new teaching strategies that enhance, students' motivation and commitment and maximize their knowledge acquisition. So basically mimic the classroom output if possible. So among the different strategies, gamification has attracted the interest of educators, and gamification is not a new thing. There has been research regarding gamification in educational domain from early 2010 or something like that. Actually, even before that, but mostly after 2010 or things like that. So I have listed some papers here which will be interesting to read for those of you who are interested in gamification. So gamification is an accepted kind of a process to improve student learning and help students to keep motivated and to keep their concentration within the classroom. There are many studies, like Caponeto has done a study in 2014, Majuri has done a study in 2018, then 2018 Osatui has done, 2019 Koivisto and Amari. They have shown the various levels of positive results, and they've shown basically that gamification is a very promising thing. Now, before I go further, I would like to explain what is that. What am I talking when I'm talking about gamification? What I mean is, when I say gamify my class, I basically bring elements of games into the formal domain of teaching. What are the elements of games? Elements of games are competition. Elements of games are, leaderboards. Elements of games are keeping track of your progress, getting feedback, learning and improving yourself, improving your skills and getting a feedback for that, getting a reward for that. All of that are part of games. Every game has that. Either it's a physical game or it's an online game. Every game has these elements. So what if we bring these elements into the classroom to actually help teaching? Can we do that? That was the idea for gamification. Many people tried many things and they have gotten positive results. Basically, what people try to do is use the game elements in non-entertainment contexts to promote the learning. Games or sports or in general competition, any sort of competition is very attractive to people. That's a very basic psychology, that competition is attractive. So that's what psychologists were trying to bring in, the idea of competition within the classroom. Can we learn more by letting people compete. Although I personally do not subscribe a lot to the competition, the idea that competition always helps learning, but to some extent it does, I cannot deny. Now, over the last decade, gamification has increasingly been applied to learning environment, and many educational contexts in different educational levels, in schools, in preschools, in college level, in university level, gamification has been applied, and it has shown, like, significantly nice outcomes. Now, gamification is essentially a part of psychology. We are tapping the student's brain here. We are making the student's brain excited, whereas in a normal classroom, they might have been bored. So I'm stopping them from being bored. That's what I'm doing. So what all are the psychological aspects that we need to keep in mind when we are talking about gamification? There are several theories. One theory is, that the activities should enhance students' intrinsic and extrinsic motivation, both intrinsic and extrinsic motivation. So in this line, this self-determination theory places the focus on three basic psychological needs. It says a student should feel a sense of autonomy. Student should relate herself to the problem at hand or to the challenge at hand. And there should be the psychological need of competence. The student should feel competent in that. So gamification must fulfill, if not three, at least one of them. I would suggest go for all three. So autonomy, relatedness, and competence. That's one theory of the self-determination theory of gamification. Now, there is another theory. It's called a goal-setting theory. Goal-setting theory associated with gamification says that there are likely 4 factors linked to students' performance. Their commitment towards the goal, the feedback they receive, the complexity of the activity, and the situational constraints. So whenever you play a game, I don't know if you are familiar with playing, online games. These are very familiar 4 factors in online games. So the commitment towards the goal, there is a goal, there's a score, you increase your score, there's a goal there to win or, destroy your enemies or build a city or things like that. So that's the commitment towards the goal. The feedback they receive, it's naturally a part of the game. The complexity of the activity, and you have to keep a check on that. You cannot make it too simple, then the students will get bored. Too simple games are never popular games. If it cannot be too complex so that it's really difficult for them to even understand what's going on, then also they will alienate themselves from the game. So if you want to keep them engaged in a game, you have to actually attain a certain balance of activities, certain balance of complexity, and the situational constraints. So according to this theory, according to goal-setting theory, gamification would require a challenge, it would require an indication of progress, it would require some kind of feedback, levels of achievement, what levels unlocked and things like that, and a sort of competition. You can read more about that in Huang and Hugh 2018 paper, which is listed below. So these are some of the basic requirements of gamification according to the goal-setting theory. There is another theory of gamification. Now remember, all those theories are coming from psychological research. So another theory, the third theory related to gamification, is called flow theory. Flow theory says that there should be an optimal psychological and physical state that should maximize the enjoyment and engagement. So according to this theory, gamification requires specific and understandable goals. It requires immediate feedback. It requires achievement indicators and an adequate balance between challenges, skills, and the perceived value of the activity. So you understand, when I'm talking about an adequate balance between challenges, skills, and perceived value of the activity, this actually in itself, by definition, it is engaging the student, because there is a challenge. The challenge should not be too complex to surpass the skill, and the challenge has to be accepted by the student. The challenge will only be accepted by the student when the challenge is valuable. So it seems that there are a lot of things that we need to keep in mind when we gamify a classroom. So let's say I'm teaching a theory. If I'm teaching a theory, if I just use the PowerPoint bullet points and one by one keep teaching the theories, that at some point of time, students' brains shut off. So they are like, okay, this PowerPoint will be available, right? So I will go back and read this PowerPoint maybe just before examination, and I'll understand what is there. After all, this is the document from where the questions will come. So why do I bother? Because already it's getting too much. I just missed whatever she said in the last 5 minutes. So I cannot understand whatever she is saying now. So because there is a lag, and I will, because of this lag, I will not understand anything further. So let me just shut down my brain. This alienation we do not want to happen, and that's why we bring gamification here. So what we do here in the classroom is we convert the theory teaching to some kind of a play, some kind of a game between the students. When I engage students in a game, I clearly say that, see, this is a game that you will be playing. You have to achieve this. So I set a specific goal. I set a specific and understandable goal. And then I say that after each level, you will get to know whatever reward you are getting. So that gives them an immediate feedback after every level. Then I tell them that if you surpass these and these levels, you go to the next round, which gives them an achievement indicator. And then, because I am dividing the whole game process into various small parts, I can keep an eye, I can monitor that if somebody is lagging behind, if somebody is going too fast, if the challenge
Participants are required to be patient, maybe due to connectivity issue. Ribbon sir got disconnected from the meeting, so he'll be resuming soon. Yes, sir is there online.
Yes, I'm so sorry. There was this network issue for which I got disconnected.
No issue, sir. Please continue. Thank you.
Yeah. So as I was saying, that the idea, the goal is to wrap your theory in a competition. And the competition should not be too difficult. The rules of the competition should be very easy to understand. So the first thing is you have a theory and present it as a game. And the rules of the game, should actually correspond to the focus of your theory. That's how you develop the game. And then the game should have definite stages so that you can monitor the development. And the game should have definite goals. The game should have feedback. And most importantly, in my experience, the game should have rewards. Rewards is very important. Otherwise, a game is not a game. You have to have rewards in some kind of sense. And then only the rewards actually translate to the perceived value of the activity. Because before a student knows theory, the student has no idea how valuable the theory is. So the theory has no value to the student. What will have value if the student emerges as a winner? If the student gets some amount of, let's say, Amazon gift card or something like that, some kind of rewards. It can be a candy as well, but it's a recognition of a winner. So that makes the exercise valuable. And when the exercise is valuable, it's your domain now. When you get students to agree to play the game, now you make them play the game, and at each stage point them out what mistakes they're making, what great thing that they're doing, and the great things and the mistakes will actually shape up the theory that you are trying to teach to the students. So according to the goal setting and flow theories, actually, we need, besides designing applications with capability to increase students' motivation, we must, as teachers, also consider the special difficulties that the students face during confinement. So that they can use gamification to mitigate the physical and psychological constraints associated with the situation of quarantine. Thankfully, the students that we teach nowadays are pretty familiar with the online gaming scenario. Some kind of online games, most of them play, whether it's very basic or very advanced. So that comes to our advantage because we don't have to train them a lot to make them understand the game, because they're familiar with the structure. They know there is a rule. They have to read the rule. They know they have to learn by playing more and more. So all of that is already there. So it's good that COVID happened at this time, so that that actually helps people like us, teachers like us, to connect better with the students, because the students are already equipped. Whether we are equipped or not, students are already equipped with that. Now, given this basic understanding of gamification, I would like to move on to talk about essentially the example of gamification in management domain and my personal experience. In management domain, gamification has been there for long, but there are not many structured research about it so that we understand whether it's successful or not. We don't really know much about it. In 2021, Pakini and Pirutat, they have written a paper where they investigated the effect of gamified and non-gamified learning for an ERP course, an enterprise resource planning course. What they did is they have two versions of e-learning platforms they have developed. One has game elements like avatars, challenges, levels, points, progress bar, and leaderboard. And another is without game features, just the exams and course material. Furthermore, in the study, what they did, they considered students' personality traits as well, whether their extroversion, their neuroticism, their conscientiousness, their agreeableness, their openness, their imagination, and things like that also considered. Now, a test is there before and after each chapter, and web monitoring was also done about their performance. According to the results by Pakini and Puritat, the gamified e-learning group showed higher engagement during the first 2 weeks, but then it started to drop. And by the end of 4th week, both groups had equaled their activity. So this is very interesting to understand and know that gamification, although you can engage students using gamification, this is what my personal experience also suggests, that you can engage students using gamification, but gamification, let's say you do a gamified class in the beginning of the course, that will not ensure that students will be, happy attending your class for the rest of the semester. No, don't ever think that. That will make them inquisitive, curious, and happy in the first 3 sessions, and that's that. Then they will very quickly go back to their previous selves. So gamification is not a one-time activity. In Pakini and Puritat's case, they did it for one time. So that's why they actually saw that during the first 2 weeks, there was higher engagement, but then it started to drop. And by the end of 4th week, both gamified and non-gamified groups have equaled their activity. They also have seen that gamification motivated students to start working during the first days a lesson was available, whereas the non-gamified group delayed their activity to the end of the week. Now, non-gamified group, we know them. These are our regular students. You teach them, they will never read the notes unless it's time for the exam. I'm not blaming them. That's a standard practice. That's a culture that we have developed, because our educational culture is an exam-based culture. So their goal is to pass the exam. We have made it so important. We have made exams so important that it is biting us back right now. So they don't care about the teaching, a lot of them. So they need the notes so that before the exam, they will study and probably do real good. What they've seen, Pakini and Puritat saw that the group which are exposed to gamification, they are interested in their lessons far earlier than the other group, because probably they're expecting gamification in every lesson, because that's where they were very interested. So that's some definite plus point of gamification. The pain point is that you have to continue doing it. Now, how do I use gamification? I use gamification for 2 of my courses, microeconomics and game theory. I teach these for MBA as well as PhD students. So I use gamification for them. I use 2 kinds of things. First, I use online simulation games, online games. I prepare the game and I ask my students to log into the platform and participate in the game. I can see the result. I show them the result after the game and explain the result. I explained why they behaved, how they behaved, and from there I get to my actual point of teaching. And generally in all these online games, I keep real life rewards. So basically what I do, so in IIMs, what we have is we have a specific budget for each course. That budget is for everything. That budget is for buying case studies, for buying books, for photocopying, and every other kinds of thing. So per student, we have a certain amount of budget. So I include in this budget this reward. So for every game, I give a criteria that if you cross this, you will be the winner, and the winner gets some kind of monetary rewards. I make it sure to be monetary, because that's something that makes them the most interested. I don't give them lakhs of rupees, of course, but even if it reaches something like 500, 600, 700 rupees, that's a good amount for them to win, by playing a game in a class. I mean, who would have thought of that? So that's a great thing for them. They don't expect of earning that for coming to the class. So that does two things. One is, when I announce the reward beforehand, that makes them inquisitive and interested in playing the game seriously, because they want to win. And because they're playing the game seriously, they think of what they're doing. And so they keep that in mind. They don't do it casually because they want to win. So because they want to win, it becomes easier for me to show them their loopholes, show them their, the bad moves and the good moves. And combining those bad moves and good moves, I teach them the theory that I want to teach them. For example, I have some examples here to show you. I want to teach them rationality. So to teach rationality, my game is something like this: that I want everyone in the in the classroom to guess a number. To guess a number between 0 to 100. I want everyone in the classroom to guess a number between 0 to 100. I tell them that I will collect everyone's guesses. I will average them. So there will be an average number. And then I will multiply the average with 0.5. Then I will get my target number. And whichever guess is closest to this target number will win. Very simple game. I just have to think about a number between 0 to 100. Apparently very simple. But then students start understanding after so I play this multiple rounds. So initially they are like, I will just select a number. They will select a random number. And then as the game progresses, they start understanding, oh, so not only my thinking is important, others' thinkings are also important. Okay, so then can I guess what others are thinking? Now the very interesting thing is, every one of us, even in this room, every one of us wants to think of ourselves as the most intelligent person in the room. So these students also do that. They think that they are the most intelligent and others cannot think like that. So at the first level, they think that I am thinking about them, but they are not really that intelligent. So they are not thinking about me. So they are again doing it randomly, but I am doing it systematically. So they start with that, okay, most of them will choose something around 50. So let me choose something around 25 so that I will be near to the X value. Because if most of them chooses 50, then average will be near 50. So half of the average will be near 25. Then in the second round, they realize that, okay, the winners and non-winners alike, they realize that now that it has happened one round, these fellows, like everyone else, they have become more intelligent. So now they're thinking like how I was thinking before. I will think one step ahead of them. So now most of them will think of 25. I will think of something around 12. So they think like that. I will show you a snapshot of the results here. If you can see, these are my students here. And these students are guessing the first these are each round. At each round, you will see the average guess. the first round started with an average guess of 39. In the second round, the average guess came down to 22. In the third round, it came down to 8.8, then 3.57, then 1.13. You see, take any individual. So this is the individual that this ideal individual that I was talking about. This guy started with 22 and realized that the target was 19.56. This is known to them before the next round. So then this guy started with 13. The target was 11. He did not win. Then he started with 4.3. He did win at this point of time. Then his guess was 1.7, while the target was 1.78. Then he came down to 0.84, but the target was actually far less than that. So he was not the winner at that point of time. So when all of them are playing, I'm showing them this, and also I'm showing them some graphs. And with that, I'm actually teaching them the idea of rationality, that how do we think about how others think, and how do we place ourselves in a situation. So because I teach business, it's very important to understand your opponent, understand your competitor. So if you have to understand your competitor, what I eventually tell them that, see, after sufficient rounds, you actually came down to this level where you don't underestimate your fellow travelers anymore. So this is the learning from the game, that you don't underestimate your fellow travelers. You don't underestimate your colleagues. You don't underestimate your competitors. You have to assume that every one of us are rational, and this is the idea of rationality here. That's one example. In the second example, I talk about trust. So this is another example where I talk about trust. So when I talk about trust, I play another game with them. The game that I play is called Centipede game. That's also very simple and easy game here. So what we play here is like we pair the students. So let's say there are two players, 1 and 2. So I give them some imaginary money on the table. I say, I give you 10 rupees. It's a move for the first player. You can continue the game, or you can take the 10 rupees and leave. If you continue with the game, then the 10 rupees will become 20 rupees. And then it will be the turn of the second person to decide whether to continue in the game or stop. If the second person stops, the second person takes the 20 rupees and leaves. But if the second person also chooses to continue, then the money on the table becomes 40 now. Now the first person has chance again. If the first person continues, it becomes 80. Now, if the second person says stop now, second person takes 80 and leaves. So this is a game. This is called a centipede game. This is a game to teach trust. So I teach this to basically make them understand that the longer the partnership is, the longer the benefit is. So if you see the end of partnership anytime soon, you make a strategic decision of withdrawing from it. But unless you see that, keep in that partnership, because a partnership or any kind of even a competitorship will only increase the money on the table. So it's not really in your interest that you leave the game early. So that's something that I teach. You see that if you look at the table here, you see that in the first round there are examples where they continue for a really long amount of time and then they stop. And second, also they continue for a really long amount of time and they stop. And then as the game progresses, you will see at this level of the game, most of them are just stopping at the beginning. So this is something that is also very interesting, that although it's good to stay with the partnership, and partnership will, only increase the money on the table, partnership is only useful when you can trust the other person. Now here in this game, there are variations of this game. In the screenshot, what I did, I made them anonymous. So because they're anonymous, they don't know whom they're playing with. So there is no level of trust. Because there is no trust, so they stop at the very beginning as the game progresses. On the other variation of the game, when they know with whom they're playing, they actually play for a really long time. There's another example of this when I teach cooperation, which is using a very famous game which is called Prisoner's Dilemma, where I teach cooperation, where I say that if you cooperate with so again I pair people. I say that if you cooperate with your partner, you will get a higher amount of money. If you do not cooperate with your partner, you will get a lower amount of money. But if your partner cooperates and you do not cooperate, you will get the greatest amount of money. So I always give them an incentive to unilaterally defect and see what they do. Here also I do two different versions of the game. One is anonymous, one is with when they know whom they're playing with. When it is anonymous, you will see most of them chose the bottom and right option, but they get the least amount because when they are choosing something, they don't know what the other person is choosing. So they are choosing right, thinking the other person will choose top and they will get $5. But other person also chooses bottom, thinking that the first person will choose left and they will get $5. Eventually, they'll end up in a trap where they get only $2. So most of them you will see has done this. And this is where I teach them that cooperation cannot really sustain without a certain level of familiarity. Cooperation with strangers is something which is very idealistic and utopian in nature. So this is one kind of gamification that I do using online simulation games. Another kind of gamification that I do is using when I do peer reviews. So when there is an assignment or an exercise, I do peer review exercises. So the assignments are given to the students themselves. So what each student will give their assignment to someone else. And so everyone will grade someone else's paper. So I will grade your paper, you will grade my paper. So we'll form a couple. How will the score? That's where the gamification comes. I say that it's not only your average score that you get from everyone. When there are two people, let's say player A and player B. So player A's assignment goes to B and B's assignment goes to A. A's assignment also goes to C and C's assignment also goes to A. So I am telling them that there is something called a score distance. There is something called a score distance that I am developing, a metric. I am saying that if you give a score to C as 50 and C gives a score to A as, let's say, 62, then their score difference, a score difference of A will be a combination of all such people with whom A is paired according to this formula. And then the final score of the student for the assignment will be calculated using the average of the grade that everyone gave her plus this score distance. What it does is very interesting, that they understand, because this is a quantitative course, they understand that if they come into contract with another person, let's say, okay, you give me 90, I will also give you 90. This is not going to work, because at every pair, this SD is going to be 0. So then you are losing out on a lot of marks, possible lot of marks. So they cannot come to a contract. And you can see there are some experimental results that I did, and these are some of the results. These are two people's graphs. So it's like when everyone else, so I fix two people and I ask them to grade each other where everyone else is separate. And at that point of time, for various kind of score difference, what is the final score that they're arriving? I see that if, let's say, there are two students, A and B, A suggests that I will give you 0, you give me 100. B suggests I will give you 0, you give me 100. If this is accepted, then A has a significant chance of scoring more than B. If this is accepted, B has a significant chance of scoring more than A. So they will never come to an agreement. Also, they will never come to an agreement of, let's give both of ourselves 100, because at that, they will actually reach the minimum of their possible scores. So the only way out of this is, let's not come into a contract. Let's go for honesty and honest judgment. So this is another way that I gamify my class. So these are just some of the examples through which I gamify my course task. And the other things that I was talking about earlier, that there can be various levels of gamification. It depends on which course you are teaching. It can be difficult when you are teaching online some science and technology thing. If you are teaching a STEM course, it is not very easy. If you are teaching a business course, it is relatively easy. It's up to you to find out your suitable game. But all I can say, and you can understand from these examples also, that it becomes very interesting at the end of the day. And students are really interested in playing these games. And I keep repeating it, let's say after 3 sessions, 4 sessions, there will be one such games, so that they remain interested in the course. And I try to inculcate whatever theory that I'm trying to teach them. I teach them through these games. So that's what I wanted to talk about in this session of this FDP. Now, if there is any question, I'll be very happy to talk about.
Thank you, Dr. Arimbam, for such a lovely thought. We have few questions in the chat box. Someone is from Mr. MNR. Sir, his query is bringing a game online, either online or offline, into the classroom. Is bringing a game into the class gamification.
Is bringing a game into the class gamification.
Yes.
As I said in the first document, bringing game elements into the class is gamification. Not a game itself, but game elements. But whenever you bring game elements, it is actually a game. Whenever you bring leaderboards, whenever you bring points, whenever you bring competition, whenever you bring rewards, it is essentially a game. It may not be an existing game, but you can gamify your course, means you are actually introducing a certain kind of entertainment within a non-entertainment domain. I cannot hear. Is there anybody who is
Am I audible, sir?
speaking? You are audible now.
Oh, yes, sir. Another query is from Mr. Varun Katuria. He says his query is games and gamification are two different things, and either activities are to be included in games or not.
Yeah, I can see the question. In physical classroom setup, activities and games are added to remove the boredom and increase participation. Likewise, virtual classroom setup can have activities with same objective. Yes. So when you have activities, that is, activity is not necessarily a game, or activity need not be gamified also. Activity means discussion is also activity. Presentation is also activity. A case discussion, a case study setup is also an activity, a classroom activity. Every set of interaction is activity. That is not gamification, neither it is a game. So there are activities which are not games, which are not gamified either. So what I'm talking about is activities which are gamified, where there is element of competition, where there is element of reward, where there is element of leaderboard and things like that.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. It's true, sir. Sir, another query is from Ms. Devika Rani Sharma. She is asking that how is gamification different from simulation?
Gamification is different. Gamification can be different from simulation because the simulation does not need to have the elements of a game. A simulation can be, let's say, you are in a pricing situation, and a simulation can be, let's say, you are a company, and there are several other companies. How do you set your price? That simulation can be set up in Excel or anywhere. You set up the price, you get some amount of profit, you try to maximize your profit and things like that. But that need not be a game, because it might not have a reward. It might be just understanding. And if it is only understanding, it is not really, in my opinion, it's not really gamification. So when you are doing a simulation-based exercise, that simulation will help you understand how the things work. But that not necessarily makes a winner out of you or instills competitiveness out of you. It may be just a self-development exercise. So that's how simulation, I mean, there are several simulation tools out for marketing, for branding, for strategy. Many simulation tools are available, mostly commercial, which are not taking any gamification aspect in them. But there are other simulation tools like what I use. They take, these gamification aspects pretty seriously. Yes.
Yes, sir. Very nice and simple clarification. Sir, few participants are also requesting to share the book link as a reference for gamification, if it's possible for you.
The OneNote that I have shared, right?
Sir.
Yeah. So I will definitely share the link of this notebook. Just give me a second. Just give me a second, because
sure, sir.
I don't want to delay these things. It's better to just do it right now. So I will share the link right away. So I have shared the link.
Yes, sir. It had been. This participant is in the chat box. The sir has shared the link. You can access in the chat box.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you.
Yeah, and Palvinder Kaur asked, you are teaching microeconomics. Yes. Can you share any ebook? Is it an ebook for microeconomics or for gamified microeconomics? If it is microeconomics, I can share a lot of ebooks. If it's gamified microeconomics, unfortunately, I cannot share, because I bring my own games into this. And if you want to look at some of the microeconomics experiment, I'm sharing another link here. Just a second, let me verify the link. So I've shared another link here in the chat box. That's what I use to create online simulation games for my student in my microeconomics class, and also for my game theory class. So you can please visit that link and create an administrator account. There's some issue there.
No, sir, it's visible, sir.
Okay, so now it's a link.
Yes.
It was not a link earlier, so now it's a link. Yeah. So I will share simulation and gamification sites to teach HRM. Okay, so Professor Madan, I would request you to maybe send me an email. So I will share some necessary resources for gamifying HRM. So thank you, everybody, and thank you for your questions. Thank you for your participation, and it was a great honor here.
Sir, we thank you for such an enlightful session. In this session, you very beautifully explain how gamification helps in tapping the brain of the students. Making them enhance their intrinsic as well as extrinsic motivation. Also, you very well deliberated at goal setting theory, means how different factors link to students' performance, and very much enlightened on how to proceed with gamification with students, which make them more valuable and useful, how they make more valuable for games and games are useful for them. And you said that games should not be too easy, not too difficult, and also reward should be associated with this. So, sir, with this, I am extremely thankful to you for sparing your valuable time and giving such an enlightenment session to us. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you once again, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Vikas. Thank you, Ms. Neha, and thank you, the organizing team of NFDP 2021.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you.
Well, participants, with this, we come to an end of day one of this online National FDP 2021. The links for both the session have been already shared in the chat as well as in the WhatsApp group. You are requested to fill those feedback forms. And tomorrow, see you all at 10:30. We will start session at 10:30, so it is advisable to join at 10:20. Thank you, participant. Thank you once again.